Hey there, it's your host, Cindy Chang, founder of Evolve Consulting Co. and the visionary behind an exciting new venture launching in 2025, making staffing accessible for companies of all sizes. Welcome back to the Fearless Entrepreneurs podcast, where we dive deep into the stories behind Canada's most inspiring brands. Together, we'll uncover how these bold entrepreneurs sparked their dreams, tackled their toughest challenges, and leaned into their fears to achieve success. I'm thrilled you're here, bold enough to embrace the hard truths and inspired to learn from their journeys. Ready to dive in? Let's go. Today, we have a very special guest joining us today on the Fearless Entrepreneur podcast. Please help us welcome Gucci Erasmus. Launching her business in her 60s, Gucci is living proof that it is never too late to step into your true purpose. A self-proclaimed wayfinder and wisdom architect, titles gifted to her by women who truly know her, Gucci is on a mission to help others break free from limiting beliefs and embrace their most authentic selves. Through her Gem Power coaching and classes, she helps people move from asking, "Am I enough?" to boldly declaring, "I am enough." No more shrinking to fit in or keeping the peace. It's time to be fierce, original, and unapologetically you. Gucci's journey is as rich as it is inspiring. She has over decades experience as a corporate leader, entrepreneur, author, coach, Gestalt practitioner, and stylist. This is true. I've seen her in many functions and I want everything she is wearing. She has navigated marriage, divorce, motherhood, grief, mental health challenges, and even moving halfway across the world from South Africa to here, all while questioning whether she was the right type of woman. Now she helps others reconnect with their whole selves, overcome procrastination, self-doubt, and lack of motivation, and finally do the inner work that leads to lasting transformation. If you've ever tried self-help books, therapy, and yoga, but feel stuck on your own, Gucci is the guide you've been looking for. Join us as we deep dive into her powerful story, her coaching philosophy, and how she helps others embrace their full potential. Welcome, Gucci, to the show.
Thank you, Cindy. Wow, I'm thinking, that's an interesting woman. Oh, you're talking about me.
That is you. And so when you hear all the accomplishments that you have made, how does it make you feel?
I'm not done yet, quite honestly.
I love that.
Because I think all women
Yeah.
feel that they're very ordinary. In an ordinary life, you can do incredible things.
Tell me more about that.
I was trying to think about when this started, because certainly when I was a kid, celebrity culture did not exist. But when I had a son and a daughter, and as you know, my daughter and you are the same age, celebrity culture was really sort of first coming onto the radar. And I can remember my daughter coming home one day from high school and saying to me, "I want to be famous." And she was very young. I think she might have been 11 at the time.
Yeah.
What does famous mean? But I think what started to happen is for women in particular at that time, we put certain women who were movie stars, performers, etc., on a pedestal. And they became sort of an extension, if you like, of that object. And women felt like, oh, if I'm not extraordinary, if I'm not a star, if I'm not held up or put on a pedestal, ordinary doesn't count. And yet, I look at the women that I think are really incredible. And most of them had very ordinary moms, if you use that term ordinary.
Yeah.
You know, women who might have worked, might have been at home, had sound values, let their kids get dirty, took them to the library, took them on adventures, packed up their homes and moved around the world. By the way, for me, that was twice. First time without kids, second time with kids.
Yeah.
So I've done that international relocation twice.
Wow.
But to me, it's within the reach of every woman. And why should you stop?
Yeah.
I mean, why should you stop?
And I agree with you. And I think that women are often put into this box where once they've hit a certain milestone, they feel like, okay, like this is all that society expects of me. And then they just kind of stop. And now I see this new age of women really kind of coming out where there's a burning desire to want more.
Well, what is really interesting to me is that term midlife crisis. It's not used very often for women anymore. I think I still hear it connected to men.
Yeah.
He bought a pickup
the
truck.
Porsche.
Or whatever. Yeah, exactly. Porsche or pickup truck.
Yeah.
It's a midlife crisis. But what I find really interesting is you touched on something that's really important to me, is that idea of midlife. And to me, that is not chronological.
Yeah.
So, it doesn't mean that when a woman is 40 or 45 or 50, she doesn't have the same value. What I see as being sort of the midlife breakthrough point is for women in particular, especially if they have raised children. They get to a certain time, usually somewhere between the age of 40 and 50, their kids are not as dependent on them anymore. They don't need to be fed and be up at night and that kind of thing, we hope. And all of a sudden, those women find themselves in the middle of their life. And they wake up and say, well, what's happening here?
Yeah.
The chickens have come home to roost.
Yeah.
I should have brought my chicken with me. I have a chicken toy that I use sort of as a mascot to make the point that if you have left things unaddressed, boundaries or attending to your education or things that you would really desire in intimacy, etc., eventually when some of the demands on a woman clears, either from career or raising kids, all of a sudden those chickens come home to roost. And then it's like, what do I do with this? So many women often at that point, which previously would have been called she's having a midlife crisis, they feel restless, they might get very apathetic, depression often visits at that time. And I think that this is the space where we really need to open ourselves to uncover what is really going on, because most women have lost touch with their personal authority somewhere along the way, between age of 11 and I'm going to say roughly around 40. So the women I've worked with, I always thought my demographic would be kind of the 40 plus woman, but I've worked with some women much younger, and I've had some women show up to say, I want to work with you, and they're in their 70s. They've still been caring or doing stuff, and all of a sudden they see this gap in their lives, and they're like, what's going on here? I'm not all of me.
This is probably one of my most favorite topics right now. And I don't know if it's because I just turned 40 last year, but you do feel that pivot and that shift. And it's in your core. It's like in your identity. It's so fascinating that it doesn't have to be a bad thing, but society or culture or whatever it is have led us to these self-limiting beliefs, expectations that once you become a mom, typically it's like when you become a mom, your life is over, and you just aren't curious to explore the better parts of yourself to amplify that, right?
100%.
Yeah.
And we don't have the time. I mean, quite honestly. And then for many women, just as their kids are reaching some independence, many women then find themselves also needing to care for an older relative. And so you go from giving in one realm to having to give support in another realm and little support for self.
I can't wait to unpack all of that. So when we were reading the intro, the audience can't see it, but something made you really emotional there. Tell us what really kind of stood out for you.
I've kept going.
Despite all
Many
the obstacles,
things. Yeah.
What is the emotion that's coming up for you? Like, are you proud?
It's a realization that all of us have steel within us. And accepting that for me and the way I was raised is actually quite hard, even now, even though I know it. So one of the things that's interesting, Cindy, is lived experience is so important when you work with other people.
The most important.
And what I know from my background is for little children, once they can start to sit and stand and start feeding themselves, even if it's just messy stuff. The two things that we learn first in life is that we are small and vulnerable and the world is very big, so we could easily get overwhelmed. And the other thing we learn is that actually we are not attached to our mothers. So we could very easily be abandoned. And in an emotional construct, a lot of women feel that when they hit the sort of midlife period, but they don't know where it comes from. And so that, for me, is a very emotional thing when I think about women, not just for myself.
Yeah.
It's like, really and truly. I worked with a client who had been doing therapy for many, many years. And I think she healed a lot of things in therapy. But until she and I had that conversation, she had never realized what it was to depend on herself. When you tell me, hey, these are all the things you've done, I'm like, holy cannoli. It's really emotional appreciation for myself.
And you've accomplished the things that you have set out to do. But not only that, it comes from a really deep place because it comes from a place of care and it comes from a place of wanting to make impact in other people's lives. Because at the end of the day, we aren't meant to stand alone on an island. We are meant to be in a community and in a village.
Exactly.
And you've really helped pioneer and spearhead that, which is really great. I think you're amazing, and I can't wait to dig into all the different nooks and the crannies. I know you have had an adventure in a whirlwind of a life. So let's start from the very beginning. Where were you born? How did you grow up? Like, what did you aspire to be? And then how did you get to Canada?
So I was born in Johannesburg, that's South Africa, for those people who might have forgotten geography because it might be a while ago.
Yeah.
And my family was actually British.
Okay.
So I was the only one in my family who was born in South Africa. So they often like to tell me that I was sort of the odd man out or the foreigner because I wasn't British per se. So it was quite an Anglo-Saxon upbringing. My dad owned a construction company. We lived in a nice home outside town. We had a fairly big amount of land. It wasn't a farm, but we had chickens and dogs and all that kind of stuff. And went to the local school. People who lived there had lived there for years, etc. So early childhood, wonderful. By the way, beautiful climate in South Africa. Absolutely perfect climate. You can be outdoors all year round. In those days, when I was a child, it was okay for your parents to say to you, be home when the sun goes down.
Yeah.
Very different to what it is like for
now.
today. Very different.
Yes.
So did not experience helicopter parenting. And I used to go across the road and visit friends across the road and so on. That part of my childhood was really great.
Yeah.
Big shocker came when I was 10 years old. My 3 older siblings had already left home because there's a big gap, and my parents separated. So now all of a sudden I found myself as the only child in a single parent family with a mother who was struggling with mental health. But she worked in a bookstore, which was wonderful.
Yeah.
And so for quite a time, I actually aspired having a bookstore. I love reading. I love books. Both of my brothers were very interested in motorsport. And although I was still way too young to drive, I definitely was attracted to speed. At the same time, I also was doing a lot of equestrian sport. So I was very healthy, fit and healthy, and still doing a lot of stuff outdoors and doing equestrian team sports and individual. So that was all really great. High school, I went to an all-girls high school. That's an interesting experience for those, I think, even today. One incident from high school which really stands out is there was a girl in my class who had a very big family, Catholic families, most of them had lots of children, and she had a real wicked sense of humor. And she was always getting into trouble. Anyway, one day we were sitting in class and the nun who was teaching us, I think it was an English class, looked out of the window in an upstairs classroom, and there was a young man streaking across the field, stark naked, streaking across the field. And so my friend Julia started to laugh, and our whole class got detention until someone owned up for organizing this. Well, no one knew who it was.
Right.
And I started to realize how unfair some of the things were that we were experiencing at school. There were other things, but that was really one that stood out.
Yeah.
I don't like this kind of authority.
Yeah.
And I also don't like this idea that some things are, maybe they're not ideal, but they're not evil. You don't need to punish kids for things like that. So I think a little rebellious side of me started emerging probably around about the age of 15. And when I was that age, I can honestly tell you also more of my friends were boys than girls because I was in the horse community. And so I rode with a lot of boys and did lots of 3-day eventing and stuff like that. But eventually I ended up leaving that school and doing my last 2 years of schooling at what was called a commercial college.
Okay.
So I took business economics and things like that, which have served me very, very well in the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Better than domestic science because I really didn't think I was going to be tied to a stove forever.
Yeah.
Nor have I been.
Domestic science.
That's what it was called in those days.
Right.
You need to learn to change a diaper, cook.
Was a class?
That was a class.
That was a
Darn
class.
socks. I'm like, I'm not darning any guy's socks. So that's what I did for high school. But all the while, I'm living at home with a mother who's really struggling. After high school, I thought, I need to take a gap here before I decide what to do. I really wanted to study psychology, but I wasn't quite sure what that would look like in my life. And during that sort of gap year, I met a man, never been married before, but quite a bit older than me, who was going to be leaving South Africa to go and work in Germany. I was like, well, we should get married because I want out of here. I was 18 when we got engaged. I was 19 when we got married. And I left South Africa when I was 19. Now, here is the kicker. At age 19, I was not allowed to marry him under South African law unless both my parents signed a form to say they gave me permission to marry him.
Are you a minor at 19 in South Africa?
No, you're a minor until you're 21. I mean, it was ridiculous. I could drive a car, I could drink alcohol, but I couldn't decide who I was going to spend my life with.
Right.
And also because of the laws at the time in South Africa, I can't remember if they were more than that, I couldn't actually leave the country with someone that I wasn't married to. So I couldn't just say, oh, I'm going to live with this guy and leave the country.
Yeah.
Thank heavens lots of those kinds of things have changed. So I went to live in Munich. And I loved living in Munich.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a beautiful city and just allowed me to discover some of who I really am.
So pause for a second here. You're 19 at this time. You're like, I'm going to marry this man and I'm going to move to Germany.
That's
totally different continent.
And I didn't speak German.
And you didn't speak German. And international travel probably wasn't as melting pot as it is today.
Absolutely.
So you'd probably have to rely more on German than English at that time.
Exactly.
How did your family react? Because if my daughter was 19 and she's like, Mom, I'm out of here, new continent, marriage, I'd be like, I'm going to chain you to the basement.
I never discussed it with my older siblings.
Okay.
So I think they probably just thought I was stark raving mad. My mom was very angry, I think more than anything, because that meant she was actually going to be on her own. I was not there. And my father said, hey, if this is what you want to do, go and have an adventure. If you don't like being married, you can change that. If you don't like living in Germany, you can change that.
Interesting.
So the very different viewpoints and so on.
That is very interesting that you had two very opposing emotional sides. One that's like, go and have fun. If you make a mistake, no big deal. Yeah. And then one that's like the emotional guilt that trickles in.
Exactly.
Okay. So you're living in Germany now. You're just living life in Germany.
I had the most amazing time. I went to school. I learned to speak German. I started my own little business and I started teaching business executives.
Yeah.
And just through happenstance of talking to someone on the train one day when I was coming back from the market, I got signed on, if you like, by one of the big commercial banks in Munich. And they became my adult family, right from the chairman of the bank, who used to ask me what I wanted, to get his secretary to call me, what would I like for lunch when I was coming to work with him. I had such a blast with those people. I mean, there I was, little 20-year-old me, going there 3 times a week, getting paid really well for it, trying to figure out who I was. But they were just amazing.
Yeah.
I met this group of people who just had much broader minds. It was cool. I probably, if I went back to Germany and spent a week, I'd be free. I mean, I haven't used it for a while.
Yeah.
But if I pick up a German newspaper or magazine or watch something German on TV, it's not a problem. I mean, before I started this entrepreneurial journey, I worked for a Swiss pharmaceutical company.
Right.
So I did use my German there.
Interesting.
Because our head office was in
That's
in
so
Switzerland.
cool.
Yeah,
I never knew that about you.
Yeah.
You speak German. So how long did you live in Germany
So I lived in Germany for 3.5, almost 4 years.
Oh.
And then I came back to South Africa and was then also in university and became a mom. So I'm like, just do
we're missing a couple pieces here. So you had your marriage. Was this the marriage that then ended, or did he come to South Africa?
No, he came back to South. He's the father of my children. So we came back to South Africa. He was working for Siemens.
Yeah.
And he had been sent to Germany to work on a big international project. When that was done, they offered us Mexico. We just decided that Mexico probably wasn't something we were ready for at that stage.
Yeah.
So we came back to South Africa and started a family while I was studying psychology and English.
Okay, so you came back to South Africa, and how old were you at that time?
So I was 22 and a half, 23 when my son was born, and 25 when my daughter was born.
So you were still in Germany at that time, or you had already
come
been
back.
back?
So
okay.
From 19 to basically 22,
Okay.
I was in Germany, 22, early 23, came back, had my son. 2 years later, had my daughter.
And how was being a mom for you, like at that age? Like now women have children older. Like I can't imagine having kids in my 20s. I would have been emotionally not ready for it. How did you feel? Were you ready for it?
I don't know how one can really be truly objective about that. I think it's more about how you are as a person. When I came back from Germany, I felt I really knew who I was. It had been a very mind-expanding experience, living in a foreign country, doing things completely differently to the way I'd grown up, having this group of people around me, fabulous human beings, and just a different kind of lifestyle, using a train, walking to the market, all that, totally different. So I felt quite that I knew myself when I came back from Germany. How was motherhood for me? I mean, I was really excited when my son was born. Mm-hmm. I just need to say he was an awful sleeper. Yeah. Again, I found myself with friends who were a little bit older, who had kids who were also international. So the experience for us of going away and coming back meant that we were mixing with the women around me were really great supports. And particularly one woman, she was just a wild card. Her kid was maybe 7 or 8 years older than my son, but she was, I can't even describe it. She was so unconventional, very kind, totally unconventional. And I remember one day when my son was having a really bad day. I mean, he was a great kid, despite the fact he didn't sleep. He wasn't a big crier, but he was having a bad day. I think he was teething. And so she said, come over to my house. I've got something to keep him busy. And I went over to her house. She was a writer. And she had moved everything out of her little office except the desk. She'd moved the chair and everything else. And she had a popcorn machine. And she put that in the middle of the floor on a blanket. And she just popped corn for my son to play in. And I was like, but what about the mess? And she said, who cares about the mess? It's just popcorn. Sweep it up and throw it away afterwards.
Yeah.
I was lucky at each stage to meet women who just really were okay to be who they were.
Yeah.
And I was very inspired by them. So motherhood the first time was not an awful experience for me. I've raised a really good man. Yeah. So hopefully
I know him.
He thinks
He's good.
I was very clear early on that I wasn't going to raise a daughter to be good and a son to be strong. And I don't know where I got that from, but it was very clear to me. So when my son wanted to get in the dress-up box and wear high heels and sparkles, it's like, do it. Just have some fun. Be theatrical. Be dramatic. Do whatever you like. And the same token, if my daughter wanted to run around with a stick playing, swords and dragons or whatever, it's okay. Right. Just let your kids figure out who they are. Let them be.
Defy those societal norms that people set on children, especially.
Yes. I think sometimes as grandparents, we also have an idea of what we would like an ideal grandchild to show up in the world. And sometimes we put demands that are actually not the right demands for the kids at that time. So I know I had a few challenges with certainly a couple of times. My mom was like, why are you letting your kids do that? Isn't he too old to put on a dress when you're dressing up, etc.? And so I had to have those conversations that sometimes were hard.
Yeah.
But I also made sure I did not have them in front of the children because I didn't really know what my mom thought or what another older woman thought. So I wanted to understand that before exposing my kids to something that might make them question or be fearful about doing something. So I think we just always have to think about these things. It's easy to fly off the handle and say, I'm doing it my way. But that doesn't really help. So it's a good idea just to find another time and say, let's have a chat about that. What are your interests in raising these grandchildren?
It's interesting too, because that's very relatable. My mom and seeing my daughter growing up Asian, I had a lot of societal and cultural norms that were placed on me, and I just didn't fit into that box. I was loud. I was obnoxious. I think something that you were talking about that really spawned a light in me was that you were really attracted to people that expanded your thinking. And I was really attracted to that. When you're growing up, you're only taught to think in a certain way because you grew up with your parents and that's how they thought and that's what they do and that's how they react. But then when you meet new people and you're like, whoa, we can react like that and we can behave like that. This is amazing. And the generational gaps of how my mom sees how I raise my kid versus the generation above her or the generation below me, I find is very fascinating because you always bring in what you know, but that isn't always the best way or the way that you want to do it. Right.
What you bring in might be good and there might be other good.
Yeah.
Or you might be bringing something in it's a cycle that needs to be broke. About bringing in what? One of the things I do with all of the women I work with is have a very good conversation about getting out of your echo chamber. Because most women look at the people that they're friendly with, the women they're friendly with. Let's just leave the men out of it at the moment. But the women that you're friendly with, they'll probably be very much like you.
Yes.
In a lot of ways, more similar than different.
Yeah.
And that at various points in my life, I've been exposed out of necessity to be with very different people. And it's been a game changer for me. So let me see. Probably when I was about 58, I was working still in corporate and so on. I suddenly looked around. I was at a dinner. I remember very clearly the day. I was at a dinner in Zurich and I looked around the table and I was like, I think there were 2 people of color, but everyone else was fairly senior in the organization, well educated, had a lot of privilege. And I thought to myself, this is going to be problematic for me because I'm losing sight of what it's like for other women. So I went on a campaign. I made a very clear commitment to myself to meet and really build relationships with women who were different from me and particularly of different age groups. Many women in different age groups and different demographics and different parts of the world doing different things. And some of them have become really good friends. And it's amazing because I like a different perspective. I love to hear your perspective. I call my friend Sophie, who's in Melbourne, who is 40, and I say, hey, Soph, what do you think about this?
Yeah.
And she's Australian and she's got a different viewpoint. This is important for us women. You talked about a village early on. In generations previously, there were real villages. Generations lived together in the same house. Generations did things in the town, whether it was going to church on Sunday and meeting afterwards. We don't live like that anymore. Families are exploded across the globe, etc. So we have to find a way to bring in that difference.
I agree.
Familial systems get so baked in.
Yes.
And you think about the things that are handed down. So the other thing I really work on is inherited beliefs.
Yeah.
They don't all have to be bad, but you need to know what they are. What have I inherited from my family?
Interesting.
What does that mean for me?
I love that. So Gucci, in your honest opinion, why do you think that some women stay in this echo chamber versus what is the difference between the women that want to break free from that echo chamber?
Right. First of all, I think quite often we're not aware that we're in an echo chamber. We have friends. Our friends make us feel good. We get together with them. We have a dopamine hit. If we've got really good friends, we have really good conversations about everything from raising kids, how to get more intimacy in our lives, politics, whatever it is. So when you have really good conversations, I think it creates this sense that you're getting a lot of input. So it's not to say that that's not good. That's a really great core. But sometimes I think we don't realize there's something else out there. Then I think for some women, it's actually fear. Many women I've spoken to have told me things like, I'm not really up on current affairs, or I didn't go to university, or I had to drop out, or. So I don't know what to talk about. I don't know how to talk about things. Just go and listen. Ask good questions. Find out stuff. This is the best way for a woman to raise herself. Yeah. Get new input. Think about, how does that feel for me? What does it mean for me? What can I learn? Get curious. Explore.
Let's go back to inherited belief. So what do you think? Give me your perspective on inherited beliefs and how that can be self-limiting down the road for people in general.
Well, I'll give you a story first, which is a funny story because everybody will relate to it.
Okay.
So this is a woman is watching her daughter get ready to put a turkey in the oven at Thanksgiving. And the daughter is cutting the wings off the turkey. And so the woman says to her daughter, why do you do that? And she says, well, Mum, that's what you always did. Why did you do it? And the mother said, well, that's how I was taught to do it. And away from the living room comes the faint voice of the grandmother who says, yes, I always did that too. So they both looked at the grandmother and said, why do we cut the wings off the turkey? And the grandmother said, well, it was quite simple. My oven was too small. We laugh, right? But this is what happens. We don't realize that we observe these things, like cutting the wings off turkeys, and we think, that's how it has to be. I think it's so important. So, you think about inherited beliefs, and many of them come to us through sort of subliminal messages. So I ask women things like, how did your father speak about women? How did he talk about your mom when your mom wasn't around? How did your mom talk about herself? I remember my mother, she didn't swim. She grew up in England. People who grew up in England didn't swim. They lived at the coast. But I can remember my mother having this thing about her arms. My mom was slim. I mean, she had the same build as me, just genetically she was slim. And I can remember her saying on the hottest summer day, to no one in particular, probably to one of her friends, I could never uncover my arms, because I have these bags that hang under my... I don't remember seeing those bags because her arms were always covered. Do you know that when I was in my probably 20s, there are so few photographs of me because I was anxious that bags under my arms would show on a photograph.
Wow.
Right?
Because it's like so deeply ingrained.
It's so deep in. And until someone asked me one, hey, I'm looking through all your family albums. Why are there so few photographs of you? It's always... Dad with the kids, your mom with the kids, where are you in all this? And I said, I was really embarrassed about my arms and my neck. No one had ever said to me, you have terrible arms, you have a terrible neck, whatever. It was ingrained. So we inherit beliefs sometimes very subliminally.
Yeah.
And then there are beliefs that we inherit that are very explicit. Things like, if you dress like that, you're asking for trouble. I mean, this is a big one that many women in many cultures have shared with me. What does that really mean? If a man or someone has bad intentions, they're going to have bad intentions no matter what you're wearing.
Yeah.
It's about helping our young, our girls, our offspring, our grandkids to just really think about what is the right choice for me in this situation. Let's rather help them grow to be responsible, to sum up and evaluate a situation and think about it. Not to be afraid of it, but to make good choices.
Yeah.
I mean, there are certain places that I go as a 60-something-year-old woman where I do think, I know it's a bit of a rough area. I'm going to make choices that I think are going to work best for me.
Right.
But that's what we want women to do. We don't want women to think that, oh, golly, I'm going to attract trouble to myself if I wear the short skirt or the red lipstick or the whatever.
Yeah.
That doesn't help any. And especially without conversations. You know, if a mom says that to her kid, she should also be prepared to say, I'm telling you that because this was my experience. And then it's contextualized.
Yes.
And it becomes a conversation, not a belief system or a value.
That becomes really dangerous because what we feed, they eat, and they just build into their subconscious. What do you think makes a woman strong in their upbringing? What's really important?
Conversations are really important. I hear all the stuff about social media. I just read the book, The Anxious Generation, because I'm really interested in his research. It's really good. First of all, there was no TV in my house. Then there was TV, and so I've lived through those generations. I don't think these things are intrinsically bad. What I think makes a strong woman is someone who's been raised in a home where there's really good. If your kid is watching a movie, some of the movies that are rated for children horrify me. I mean, they've got things in that I wouldn't want a child to watch without a conversation. It's not that the movie is bad, but what is the child going to make of that? What is the child going to think is real, is scary, is allowable, etc.? So for me, it's more about how do we have more conversations in the home. And I think we've lost that art. I mean, I look at all the women that I look up to and they all tell me the same thing. Wow, we had great conversations. Sometimes it was with grandparents or aunts and uncles. But conversation is so important. I think that makes a woman strong and resilient for starters and helps that development of being able to think for herself.
Do you think we've lost that a little bit?
I do, Cindy. I mean, sport is outside of school now. So when parents have kids in sport, they're running this way and that. And if you've got kids in different sports, and I don't know how women do that or how families do that for sure. And I think more and more women are juggling more and more just in order, the cost of everything. So I totally recognize that this is a huge challenge. I do think we've lost that because the other demands of life are pulling us away from quiet family time.
Yeah.
And I really like to encourage people to do that. Sit on the sofa with your kid, lie under the tree with your kid, and just have a conversation about anything. It doesn't really matter what it is.
Yeah.
It's that art of conversation. That's the true connectedness. Sit beside your kid watching TV. When one show is done, don't automatically let it run into the next one.
Yeah.
Stop. Go in the kitchen, have whatever. What did you think of this character? What did you think of that character?
Yeah.
If it's a series, what do you think is going to happen next? These are important things. Children's minds need to be opened to different possibilities. And the distinction I make is, are we trying to fill ourselves, including our kids, with information, or are we trying to grow knowledge? And they're not the same thing. Information is like pushing data in.
Yeah.
I mean, when we're scrolling, what are we doing? It's information.
Yeah.
Knowledge is, here's a data point. Let me explore. What does that really mean? What does it mean for other people? What does it mean for my family? What does my daughter think about that? And you start expanding into, so what is the meaning of it? How does it pertain to my life? How does it expand me or diminish me? How can it help me achieve my dreams? That stuff is knowledge. But pushing information in is not the same as knowledge.
And I feel that now, and I know you're a big promoter of doing digital detoxes and just stepping away from information overload because our brain can't process at that speed. And I feel for kids nowadays that are digital natives who just get information shoved down their throat all the time that they don't know what to do with it.
Right.
And of course that causes anxiety. That causes anxiety for me. And I'm a fully baked human being. Brains don't fully develop until they're 26.
Right.
And so I can't imagine even the way that I hear my daughter talk sometimes. She's 5 years old and she'll be like, "Hey mom, this person said this to me." And it makes me pause and think about what she says. And that's only what one person said to her. Now at 7, 8, 9 years old, where they're getting information at all times, how do they process and decipher and filter through and, to your point, like put into context the information that they're getting? It's probably really tough, right?
It's really, really tough. And especially if you don't know what's going on for your kid. So if your kid is struggling with anything or is curious about anything and there are no conversations, those rabbit holes can be very deep and they can go to places where it's not helpful at all. I want moms to say, let me make sure that I can ring fence some time because it is good for the mom too, or for the grandmother as well. It's not just for the child.
For sure.
I mean, when my littlest granddaughter, who's 3.5, comes to visit, quite often we lie on, she likes to take a bath in our bathtub, which is very big. And then she lies on the bed and we talk about things. And it's so interesting because quite often she will talk about her mom or her dad. And recently we had a great conversation about why her dad has to leave so early in the morning to drive to Toronto. And I said, why do you think it is? And so just to hear what was going on in her mind about that. And then she started asking me, where do you drive to? And I said, well, mostly I work at home. And so she said, oh, my dad works at home too. But what I could see is she started to understand that the fact that he's leaving home early isn't something she needs to be afraid of. It's just part of one of the days, the way he works and so on. So normalizing some stuff. And it was just a really great conversation. And we've had many of those. That was just one of them that was so sweet because she was worried about him leaving so early compared to his work from home day where he can have pancakes with her and drop her at school and what have you. She was frowning. He has to drive all the way to Toronto. And I said, well, sometimes we like to meet people in person. What does that mean? Right. So I said, well, you and I are in person, but when we FaceTime each other, that's called virtual connecting. And both are wonderful. But I said, when we're in person, we can roll around and tickle each other. It's so important to chat with your kids.
That spawns two thoughts for me is that if that went unregulated or undiscussed, or she's just left to fester like, oh, my dad leaves early in the morning, people as natural human beings just tend to blame themselves. And that's where a lot of insecurities stem from and self-worth things stem from. I read this book when Olivia was really young called Hunt, Gather, Parent, where they talk about village and community, and you learn so many values through storytelling and connecting with family members or people who are taking care of you. It can be friends, can be chosen family. And that's really important for kids nowadays, that I think really disconnects us because of digital. And I think digital brings a lot of really wonderful things, but that art of storytelling and that value system is so inherently important to anyone's development.
Actually, I know a family who live in Texas. He's Canadian, but they live in Texas. And he did some interesting experiments with his youngest two kids.
Yeah.
And he basically got them to tell stories, and he filmed them on his iPhone. And then he let them listen back to the stories and say, now you've heard yourself telling the story. How would you do more in that character? And he said his kids are so good now. I mean, this was when they were really young. The boys are about 12 now.
Interesting.
But they were about 4 or 5 when he did this experiment with them. And he said they are so good about unpacking stuff they hear even on the news because they've had this sort of experience of watching themselves tell a story. And one of the classics was one of the boys once bent down and scratched his foot in the middle of the story. And so his dad said to him, why did you do that? And he said, because what I said there wasn't quite true. So he knew when he told the story, he had to get his face off camera.
Yeah.
And when they were looking back at it, that's kind of what he was able to say. But what a great lesson, because now when those kids watch the news or see something on social media, they're thinking, what is that person's behavior telling me? It's not just the words that are coming out of their mouth.
It's like helping them to critically think and observe their actions and behaviors.
Or even just ask a question. Hey, Dad, why do you think that guy bent down to scratch his foot right then? You know, what's going on here?
Yeah, he's lying. He's lying. I love it. I love it. So let's get back to your career and just how you got to coaching today and empowering women today. So you were in psychology in university.
I was.
You studied that. You started a family. So lots of change was happening. Yes. And so what happened after that? You ended up moving to Canada. That's why we're here.
Yes. First of all, I'm a university dropout.
Yeah.
Because the way the clinical psychology trajectory was when I was studying is in your 4th year, you had to go and work in a clinical practice with a practicing psychologist. And I went to interview. I was given a list of, I think, 6 or 7 names, and I went to interview them. And I remember by the time I got down to the 5th one, I was feeling disillusioned, I think.
Okay.
And anxious, because I met 5 people who were not the type of people I wanted to become. I didn't want to grow up to be a person like any of those 5. So I came home and I said, I'm dropping out.
Okay.
I'm going to go and work. Was it a good decision? It was just a decision. I don't know that it's actually hampered me in any way.
Yeah.
But it was a very important decision for me at that point in time. Years later, I do remember bumping into one of my professors who said, you finally realize that all psychologists are crazy.
Yeah.
And I know that's a terrible joke, but most people are attracted to these types of things because we are trying to heal ourselves. And there's a lot of research around that. Yeah. I know that I was attracted because I was trying to heal something in my family, particularly. I also discovered around that time that in addition to having really good business acumen, I had a very highly developed natural talent for observing processes of how people work. So I started working for one of the very early business process reengineering companies and doing process design. And I was very successful working for them. Had a good time working with them. We mostly serviced big banks, financial services industry. But I also noticed how people were struggling when processes were changed and new systems were put in place. There was organizational design change, etc., how people actually struggled to get on board with that change. Yeah. So I started using some of what I knew, both from my lived experience and from my 3 years of psychology, to help people. And I would build into my project work proper sort of intervention type conversations to talk about what people were concerned about, etc. And so change management was born in me before it actually had a name as a discipline. And it was amazing to see the difference it made for people who were being expected and asked to do something differently. When you prepare them, when you really have empathy for what they're experiencing, all of a sudden the journey is much easier. There's less pain and better results.
Yeah.
Some people still don't want to change, but if you take the sort of general population, I was getting great results. I was getting amazing results.
Yeah.
So that actually became my corporate career. Okay. I did some more research. I did some more training. Change management became a thing. Did some more of the OD development work, etc. over many, many years. I just kept growing my own skills. Then I was here. I moved to Canada when my kids were, I think, 10 and 13.
What brought you to Canada?
South Africa, obviously, as a country, has had many political challenges. And my first husband, the one I had gone to Germany with, I've only been married twice, by the way. I know sometimes people think, how many husbands have you had? Only two. Just two. But he was really struggling with what was going on in the change in South Africa. He'd lived through some big political changes in Europe as a youngster, and he really didn't want to be there for that. I didn't want my children to be put in a situation where they had to sort of see two value systems. My value system was very different. So I had a few choices. I could have divorced at that time, which it didn't feel like a valid step. I was like, oh, if we go and move somewhere else, maybe we can find a really good way to do this. So we looked at Australia and we looked at Canada, and we ended up in Canada. And my career in change management was going really, really well. So I continue to do that. I do have to say a little caveat here. When I came to Canada, I had no idea that I was going to have such a rough time as an immigrant. I have so much appreciation for immigrants. I mean, I was white. I had done high school French. I spoke English. I had had a really good career before arriving. And honestly, I counted for nothing.
What was tough for you?
Didn't have Canadian experience. You were not getting a job. So the first 2.5, 3 years, I worked 3 jobs at minimum wage to be able to pay rent. And then I had a breakthrough because I ended up doing some volunteering work at Simon Fraser University. And I met some people and they're like, why are you doing these jobs? And I said, I have been to so many interviews and I have been insulted so many times. And I am white and privileged. I just cannot fathom this country that is supposed to be so wonderful. It was really hard for me. And then through my connections, eventually, you know, they introduced me to someone and I got into the corporate thing and then it was fine. But I have such a deep compassion for anyone who comes to Canada as a refugee or an immigrant in any way, shape or form.
Who doesn't know the language.
Who doesn't know the language, who may look different, who, I know we are a melting pot, but man, it's hard.
But not back in those days, right? It was less of a melting pot.
It was less of a melting pot in 1990s, true.
Yeah, but it's challenging. I look at my parents who were immigrants too. They don't speak the language. They still don't speak the language. And they survive, but it takes a certain type of like grit and just like
that's where you find your
it.
Steel. Exactly.
So you ended up in Vancouver with your kids, husband at that time, and then just kind of found your way back into corporate here.
And I had a wonderful corporate career. So I can honestly say I worked for amazing companies in lots of different industry sectors. And truthfully, I really only in my career have had one terrible manager. I mean, I've worked with some challenging people. But I've only had one terrible manager. I worked with interesting teams and I was able to do interesting work. And I can honestly say my corporate career was good. Let's talk about the terrible manager. I was working for a Swiss pharmaceutical company and as a very large behemoth, what they were experiencing as long ago as 10 years ago is little biotech startups coming and starting to, you know, eat their lunch here and there. So few restructures and stuff to try and make sure that the books looked balanced. And so I went through 2 restructurings, which was fine. And then the company decided to do away with all the change management teams. And I had a big international team. I had staff in 5 countries and so on. One of the hardest days for me was letting all those people go, knowing that at the end of it, I was going to lose my job too. That was really tough. But during that process, the company was also starting a very big project with ties to the FDA and getting approval for drugs. And I can talk about it now. It was really about making sure they were competitive in the speed with which they could get their clinical information to the FDA. So it's all about process. And I was hired in to be the change and transformation lead for that project. It was going to be a 4-year project. Those were the worst 4 years of my career.
Wow.
Because I worked for a terrible person. Now when I look back, the wisdom of hindsight, I knew going in, when I went to do the interview for that role, that her area was a bit of a revolving door, because I knew people who had worked for her, and I knew that there'd been clashes, and I knew that it was a revolving door. Red flag already. So here's the thing where we can really be dumb for ourselves and smart for anyone else. If anyone else had come to me and said, I'm thinking of taking that position, I would have said to them, think very carefully, look at the signs. But I said to myself, you've thought very carefully, you've looked at the signs, and you can absolutely do it. Yes. I can be the one to change it, or I can be the one to survive this. Right. I am good enough that I can survive this.
Which probably isn't untrue, but at what cost
for
yourself?
Cost? Years run on this project, we were doing really great things. And not to go into too many details here, but I was in a situation where I realized that this manager of mine had done something not ethical. And instead of taking the whistleblower path, I took what I felt was the high road, and I sat down and met with them, and I said, I want to talk about what I think I have seen. And it was a very dramatic conversation, tears. I didn't mean to do that. I've had so much stress. I think my parent is dying.
Said manager.
I should have known better. I've been in this business for a long time. I understand compliance. I said, let's just put it in the past and move on. Fine. About 6 weeks later, we were all at a meeting in London, and I made a statement about something that the project team was wanting to skip over. And said manager basically looked across the table and said, it's not really important because you won't be here long enough anyway, to me. So I realized that I had my foot on a landmine.
Which is a HR faux pas, as we call it nowadays.
Exactly. I had my foot on a landmine. Then I knew things were going to get rough. So there was 3 months where said manager did everything possible to try and make me quit. Left me out of meetings, etc., etc. The standard fare. And I'm like, damn it, I'm not quitting. So eventually the meeting showed up on my calendar.
The 15-minute slot in the morning.
The 15-minute slot in the morning. Yeah, first thing in the morning.
Yeah.
So I got there early, and not to toot my own horn, but I was very well liked with the people that I worked with locally.
Yeah.
So I went in early. I sat in the atrium, and people just came around. And, we haven't seen you for a while. Hugs and what have you. And said manager was standing in a passageway watching this. You need to know that I am a person who has all these fabulous relationships with people I work with, and even people I don't, just people I know in the cafeteria kind of thing.
Yeah.
So went into the meeting. I still feel today really bad for the HR partner who was there. It was her first time. So went through all the steps, etc. And then the HR partner said to me, how do you feel? And I said, you might not understand this, but this is a very liberating moment for me. And then she said to me, is there anything else you would like to say? And I looked straight at the manager and I said, I want to wish you luck for wherever you go from here, because at some point it's going to catch up with you. And
karma.
Short part of the story is 7 months later, said manager was fired. No package, no nothing, fired for that will remain unmentioned. So there I was, and I thought, I think I'm going to go back to consulting. I had done consulting early in my career. I had a nice, fairly decent package. I mean, I wasn't going to argue anything. I was like, I can go and do some consulting. I've got gray hair. People love consultants with gray hair and experience.
Do I need to color my hair tomorrow?
First thing I want to do is I want to sit down and write a manuscript of a change management book. So I took 3 months and I did that. And then I said to my husband, and then I'm going to go and visit all my female friends in the States, not too many of them, there were 3. I wanted to sort of go on a trip to visit each of them. And I had already started reaching out to some of the consulting firms to look at jobs. So off I went on this trip to the States. And with one of my very, very dear friends, we decided to do a weekend in Chicago. She is born and bred from Chicago, lives in central Illinois. And we were going to take the train back. And we got on the train. COVID was being talked about a little bit here and there, and we got on this train and it was packed. And it was packed with university students who had been asked to leave campus, and everybody was sick. And so we got back to central Illinois, and my friend said to me, I think you need to get in your car and get home. So cut my trip short, hightailed it back to Canada. By the time I got here, which was 3 days after that train trip, I was as sick as a dog. So I'm pretty sure I was one of the early COVID cases.
First ones, yeah.
I'm pretty sure. I mean, I was absolutely so ill. And then the pandemic was announced. I had got over my ick, whatever it was, COVID or not, and the world kind of shut down. And all the consulting firms I'd been talking to said, well, we're not hiring because we don't know what's going to happen. So there I was. I had no job. I was 60 years old. I had a massive mortgage. Well, this is fun. I wasn't planning on this. No. This is tougher than moving to Germany or having a kid at 22, 23. So I thought about publishing my change management book. But then a realization struck me that would take me back into what I had been doing. And I wasn't really sure that that's what I wanted to do. So I had got my coaching designation
2012.
I'd been doing it because as a senior manager in a corporate position, it for me was really important to know how to be a really good coach. So I started to think about all the different things I could do. I certainly was not going to retire. And my daughter, she was talking to me about the women that she was working with in eating disorder recovery. And she was saying so many of the women around those women who were her clients are struggling. They are struggling with self-worth. They're struggling with anxiety. They don't know what to do. Now they're at home with husband, children, trying to work, juggle. What are the finances going to look like? Should they get more education? You know, the 100 litany of questions.
Yeah.
And so the first thing my daughter Rebecca and I did is we sat down and we wrote a workbook together called Dear Body, You're Not the Problem. It is still available digitally on Amazon. Every once in a while, I get a 37-cent check from Amazon because one of them has been sold. But we pooled our knowledge together just to say, let's put something out there. And that was a great exercise for me because it actually taught me how much I really know about supporting women.
Right.
Like it was like an eye-opener. That was a tearful moment for me. I was like, oh my God, I've got all this stuff. I need to be using it. Yeah. And so during COVID, I started this business. Rebecca was a shareholder in the business, and it was great. Ran masterclasses. We did a 4-week version. I did a 5-week version. I had clients that I was coaching. I was having the time of my life, being curious, experimenting, shifting and changing a little bit to make sure that what I was offering was really useful. Yeah. For me, that's the main thing, that it was really useful. And then something interesting happened. 2023 was a tough year in our family, which I'm not going to talk about here because it will just take us down many rabbit holes. But I had to do a lot more caring of others than I had planned for. And it's fine. Everybody's doing well now. But by the time I got my full focus back to my business, the world had started changing again because people were getting asked to go back to work. So they had less time. It was less easy for them to access any kind of development programs and things like that. So 2024 was actually a really poor year for me business-wise, financially. It was a really poor year. Yeah. Lots of people wanted to do stuff with me, but they were like, I just can't find the time, or my husband's now traveling, or I'm traveling, and I don't have a regular schedule. So it was a really tough year last year. The world keeps on changing. And I had, up until sort of the middle of last year, I had only worked online. Apart from one client who lived very close to where I was, everybody else, it was virtual work. But I did start getting some questions from women locally here. When are you doing some in-person stuff? So I thought, oh, this is an opportunity to experiment again. So I started doing some in-person stuff. I ran some workshops that were very well received called Getting Over People Pleasing. It's a huge thing that many women struggle with. Talk about inherited beliefs. And I've done some word of the year workshops. I did some workshops on inherited beliefs and so on. So I was just trying to see what model really works with in-person, because it's different to online and post-COVID. Yeah. Similar, but we need to do some things different. As I am the woman I am always also looking for where can I see that there is more to be done and then how to do it. So what I've done just very recently is I have created a deck of cards that is based on a psychological framework called the Johari window. And the Johari window is devised in such a way that it helps us see parts of ourselves that normally we can't see, whether we are just willfully ignoring things or there are things that are there from childhood, not necessarily traumatic things, but just things from childhood that we haven't addressed, or patterns of behavior that because human beings are very adaptable.
Yeah.
So we get patterns of behavior because of the relationships we're in, because of the work we're doing, etc. So really to try and open that up and say, can you see all of this stuff? What are you going to do with it? Is it helping you? Is it expanding you? Is it diminishing you? Is it holding you stuck?
Yeah.
So I have devised this deck of cards and it's about to come to life. Plan is I'd love to do work in groups, in organizations. So groups of anybody who identifies as female.
Okay.
To celebrate International Women's Day. If your company is going to do something for women, let's do something that's beyond cupcakes and balloons.
Yeah.
Let's do something that is really about personal growth. It's about something that you can carry forward in every part of your life.
And so I think these cards are brilliant. I cannot wait. I've already voluntold myself to Gucci to be in her focus groups because I think this is such an important conversation for women to have, especially a lot of the things that we've buried under that we don't talk about. Now, when you launch these cards, what happens with all of the things that come out? What do people do with it after it's out? Like, is it something that once you talk about it, it's just automatically more healing? Or what's the work that's to be done after that?
It's such a good question, Cindy, because I think it's all of the above.
Okay.
My plan is that I'm not going to put these cards in hands of people without a facilitator. So I would be facilitating because there's the need to debrief. Sometimes there's the need to drill deeper. Sometimes there's the need to help women reframe things because maybe a woman frames something in a way that actually is very harsh on herself. But reframing it as it was difficult, but it doesn't need to be like that. So it definitely is a facilitated process.
Okay.
My plan is when we come to the end of the actual sort of intervention is to say, now, what do each of you feel you need to do with what you've learned? Some of them may want to take some of that stuff to their therapist. Wonderful. Some of them may want to do coaching with me. Some of them may say, I am an avid journaler and this is really going to help me on my own healing or gratitude path or whatever. Wonderful. But I think it's helping each woman walk out of the room, if you like, with an idea of what she's going to do with what she's learned. And sometimes it's enough to say, I'm not sure. I need to sit with this for a while.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we just
don't know.
We don't know.
Yeah.
We need to hold things and think, I can actually just let it go. It was good to surface it and I can let it go. Or wow, now I know that. I sit with it for a while. Yes, I need to do something with it.
I think this is brilliant. And I cannot wait because what I love about it the most is that it's a prompt to really dig into and start the conversation from wherever it is. So you're really meeting where they are.
Exactly.
And I really like that because a lot of the coaching sessions that you go to or a lot of guided workshops or whatever is just like, well, let's just talk about your past. Well, what does that mean?
Right.
Like, it's so broad and it's so general that where do you start? But these pointed questions that'll really bring memories to the surface and really examine those memories like an image, I think that's very powerful.
Absolutely.
And like so many cool things, like you can incorporate like art therapy. There's so many things that are just beyond, right?
And the reason that I wanted to go this route as well is I wanted to help women be in a situation in a group where they can decide because my whole thing is about reconnect with your personal authority. How deep do you want to go? So you can be very surface and say, I'm only going to say this much about it. or you can tell the women around you, or not, you can just do it for yourself, is to say, I'm going to take a risk and I'm going to go really deep on this one.
Sure.
But that is all about personal authority.
Yeah.
Even if you pick up a card, your personal authority could be, I'm going to pass on this one.
That choose your own adventure.
Practicing personal authority.
Yeah.
Which sometimes is difficult in those types of groups that you referenced.
Yeah.
The other thing is, and I know you said, let's get into the spicy stuff. So controversial feeling or thinking, personally struggle with the fact that there is too much positivity in the world. So I think sometimes it becomes a little bit toxic.
Like toxic positivity.
Yes. So I'm not against positive psychology per se, but what I have experienced personally is going to retreats and workshops and things like that, where I know that the intention is really good, but everything is very surface.
Right.
Because nobody wants to get into this area that might feel risky or where it's difficult to acknowledge certain emotions like anger or sadness or so on. So let's keep it very happy. And I don't know that necessarily serves us as women well. I think particularly around, the emotions. I think about women, when did you last say, I'm really angry? We feel angry, but we are not in most of these group type of settings. It's really hard to be able to say that because the setting itself or the tone of the setting makes it feel like you can be totally opposite to everyone else if you do that. So my intention with the way I've designed this deck of cards is to really allow the women to just be exactly who they feel they are in that moment. Total radical authenticity. And we need to just deal with it. Something that makes me angry might not make you angry, but it's a good thing to know, because you might walk away and think, am I just being too complacent about that because Gucci's really angry about it? This is stuff that can help grow our knowledge.
Yeah.
And just help us get into our own heads and think about, what is my mindset truly about this?
Yeah,
Do I need to
challenging thoughts. And I love that. And I totally understand what you're talking about with just going to like conferences or workshops and everything is very rah-rah, right? Which is fine. Like I get the positive thinking, but sometimes that makes people feel out of place too, right?
Because if you're in a bad time, I went to a conference in Toronto last year, you just reminded me, where a woman who was sitting next to me at the table was actually weeping because there were a panel of speakers who were all talking about all the great things they'd overcome, and which fabulous.
Yeah.
But there was no kind of acknowledgement that somebody in the room might be going through something really hard right then. It was all positive.
Yeah.
And I think downplaying the difficulty sometimes, the actual day-to-day difficulty of coming through some things, because you can't necessarily just walk out of the house that you're living in, or you can't leave the parent behind who's struggling with. There are certain things that you're really tied to that can make healing or doing something different very difficult.
And turning failures into lessons and turning feelings into things that we talk about.
Exactly.
I think that is what a lot of people is missing. I love these cards and I cannot wait. Like, I will do multiple focus groups with you. And on a side note, I have like a business idea for you to grow off of that, which is great. So what are some of the hard limiting beliefs that you have experienced for women around like intimacy, let's say?
Right.
I know that's a very untalked about topic and it's taboo in a lot of places. And so what's kind of your thoughts on women and intimacy and talking about it and feeling comfortable around it?
I did a post about why do women not talk about their sex toys the way men talk about their sports gear?
Right.
I mean, if you're anywhere and you hear men talking about the new hockey stick they've bought or their new cleats or their new golf clubs or whatever, and there's so much backslapping and what have you. And I don't know, maybe it's an age thing, but I've asked many women this question. I first of all said, do you ever talk about your sex toys with other women? And they always like, exactly. Yeah. Their eyes just, they're even too stunned to take the breath in. Their eyes just get like this
Their eyeballs just fall out.
And then I don't ask them, have you ever bought a sex toy or a vibrator? I just watch what happens. And then they're like, no, I would never tell anyone. And I think to myself, that to me, that feels really weird because I just think, but this is one of those inherited belief things. You use the word, it's taboo. Why is it taboo? Why is it taboo to not feel good in our bodies? That is ridiculous. I mean, it is literally ridiculous. And, to go on from there, obviously, I grew up in a Catholic family. My mother never talked about intimacy at all. I mean, no way.
Yeah.
Nudity was even like borderline. And I can remember being pulled into a classroom probably as about a 10-year-old with a very ancient nun who was obviously very nervous because her false teeth were like clicking in her mouth. And the whole thing was, if you masturbate, you're going to die.
You're going to die. Wow.
Later on in life, it's like, oh, maybe you're going to die in a good way. Yeah. But this whole thing about these subjects that are so, and the things that women don't talk about in the same token.
Yeah.
Why do so many women wear underwear? Like Valentine's Day is coming right up. Scratches, hurts, is physically very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because there is a belief that that's what they should do for their partner.
Yeah.
Every time I walk past Victoria's Secret or somewhere like that, and I think women should want to wear that kind of stuff for themselves.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of women tell themselves, oh, I'm doing it for me. But if they really examined it, are they doing it for themselves or are they doing it because A, it's conditioned that it's the right thing to do, or B, they're in a relationship where that has very explicitly been required? There is no right or wrong, but we don't talk about it. When do women sit down and have a conversation about, hey, Cindy, what kind of underwear do you like to wear?
Yeah.
Why do you like to wear that underwear? Do you care what your husband thinks? I mean, do we ever have these conversations?
Good question.
Seldom, if ever.
Yeah. Do your cards open up some of that conversation?
Well, they might, because the questions are designed to be quite general. So if you as a woman get a certain question and you think, oh, this for me is really about intimacy, then you can go into the intimacy. But it's none of the cards are actually leading to a specific thing like lack of education, intimacy, choice for motherhood or not. That's the woman's prerogative.
You choose. Yeah.
You choose how you answer it. But the questions and the prompts are really to say, what are you carrying with you that you need to unpack, that will shed or unpack, that will help you really reconnect with your personal authority.
I love that. I love that so much. And so what's one piece of advice that you'd give to someone struggling with self-doubt right now?
I think we all have self-doubt at certain points. And so the first thing is to recognize that it's actually normal. I mean, I struggle with self-doubt, probably at least on a weekly basis. I make a decision to do something and then I'm working on it and have this moment and I think, oh, can I really do this? Am I going to be successful? Whatever. Pervasive or chronic self-doubt is really a time when a woman needs to find someone to work it through with, whether it's therapy, whether it's coaching. There's some beautiful self-help books out there, really amazing. Having the conversation just with yourself isn't going to bring breakthroughs.
Right.
So even if you've got a great friend or a sister or a different kind of relationship with your mom or another older woman, read the book and say, hey, I'd like to sit down and discuss this with you. I just want to talk it through. So a lot of that can help with self-doubt.
Like, what I'm hearing you saying too is that if it feels like an overwhelming amount of self-doubt that's happening, you're hitting a crux where you really need to address that. And it's boiling past the pot. So it's time.
Exactly. If self-doubt is keeping you away from the other things that you should be doing in your life, it is time for an intervention.
It is time.
And I always say it's not living unless you feel alive. So I always say to women, if you don't feel really alive most of the time, we all have shitty days.
Yeah.
But if you don't feel really alive most of the time, it's time to do something.
I love that. And that is going to resonate with so many different women, whatever that means to them. And they have to have the agency to choose their own adventure and choose their own power. But to even take that first step to not live in autopilot and not live in what they feel like this is it, I think that's very full circle moment for us here.
Yeah.
I love that. So I usually like to end the segments with get to know your CEO a little bit, get to know your founder. And so I have a quick little exercise that I want to just do because I think you have so much great lived experience. What is one piece of advice? Let's walk through the different decades that you would give to each decade, okay? People in their 20s.
Go out and try it. If it's an idea you have, go out and try it.
I love
You're
that.
so young. You've got plenty of time to do something else.
Runway for mistakes right there.
Exactly.
I love it. How about in their 30s?
I think in your 30s is a really good time to start to get to know yourself better because your brain has grown. You have some experience. I think it's a really good time to have your first adventure with getting to know yourself, whether that means doing therapy or getting a coach or doing something completely different. So I love solo travel. I found solo travel is one of the most enriching things for me to get to know myself. And I know travel is way easier these days.
Yeah.
But maybe solo travel that doesn't involve going to a city and a nightclub. In your 30s, take a solo travel trip to the Australian outback or to somewhere that is so totally different to what you've ever done before and learn about yourself.
I love that. I actually love that. I think that is a great time to do it because you're so mangled from your 20s. Their 20s are, I don't know if I'd go back there, but it was just you live and learn. Like your first time as an adult and you just, wow, does that take you by surprise? In your 40s.
The most important thing in your 40s is to trust yourself. You have lived experience in your 40s. Start trusting yourself. Examine the decisions you've made and just ask yourself, are these decisions expanding me or are they reducing me in some way? Are they holding me back? Because in your 40s is a really good time to do that.
That's so good. That's where I'm at right now. So I think that is perfect advice. In your 50s.
You're not done yet. I'm a great fan of an Irish philosopher who talks about life in 4 chapters, and he talks about each chapter being 25 years.
Okay.
But I think, again, society has this thing, especially for women, like if you're in your 50s, you're almost over the hill. And I don't care how many people try to tell me that it's changed. I can open a magazine or on Instagram. Every single day, I see things that tell women in your 50s, oh, doing this will make you feel younger, look younger, have a younger brain. It's bullshit.
Yeah.
Honestly, it is not over. There is so much more to do.
Yeah. And it's almost like what they're not saying is what they're really saying. I get that. And in your 60s?
Well, you know, there was a time I would have said, I don't know. In your 60s, you should just take it easy. I totally don't agree with that anymore.
Yes.
I don't agree with it anymore because I think that, for me anyway, getting to your 60s is everything that is really challenging is probably behind you. Particularly the whole menopause journey, which can be very tough for many women for many years.
Yeah.
But let me tell you, my brain has never been better.
Okay.
My body is still pretty good.
Yeah.
And everything around me keeps changing. So there's so much to learn.
Yeah.
Keep going. I wish that our funding for new businesses had a category for women over 60. You know, there's a lot of stuff for entrepreneurs, founders under 40 or whatever. But think about it. Women over 60 have lived through probably every challenge you can imagine throwing at a human being by the time they get to 60. All that knowledge, all that wisdom. And we're still probably going to live at least another 30 years if you look at the algorithms today. So why not let's make it possible to bring all that value into the world?
And that's going to take a movement because of all the self-limiting cultural stuff that people say to women in
beliefs.
Their 50s and 60s. Yeah. And that's what I aim to achieve in Dabble too, which is my new venture, where it's really helping marginalized groups like stay-at-home moms, like empty nesters, like women in their 60s who are still ready to give back. Yeah. They want to contribute. They want to be curious and learn, and they want to be able to provide. They want to provide knowledge. They want to provide impact. They just want to use their brains.
Right.
And women are so smart.
Yes, we are.
Yes, we really are. Okay, so these are just some fun, cheap, and cheerfuls here. What's one word to describe your journey?
Unexpected.
The other day I had an entrepreneur say bumpy, unexpected. Why do you say that?
With the best will in the world, you never know what life is going to throw at you.
That is true.
So I have a card on my pin board from my dear friend in Illinois that says, not quite what I was expecting. That sums it up.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because it's like what your expectations are, life always surprises you. No matter what, for the better, for the worse, like it just throws curveballs, and that's how we learn. What did you want to be when you grow up?
I think my biggest passion was actually around motor racing.
Okay.
Like my brothers, I really thought I would want to do something in motorsports, and I still enjoy a good car and a fair amount of speed. But I do it in places where it is allowed to speed. I don't put anyone else at risk.
There you go. No, you won't see Gucci under the bridge just drag racing in the middle of the night. No. This is a good question for you. I like this one after our conversation. What is the most rebellious thing you've ever done?
Wow. There have been a few. I got a tattoo. Here's my tattoo. It's in my own handwriting, and it's a Latin phrase. It says noli timere, which means don't be afraid. Tattoos were taboo, verboten in the family I grew up in.
Yeah.
I decided when I was 50, I was getting it. It took me 10 more years to actually have it. I decided when I was 50, and it took me 10 years to act on that decision.
So you got it at 60.
I got it at 60.
Yes! I love it. I love it. This is like, because I had been wanting a tattoo my entire life. And then when I turned 40, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to hum and haw forever at this. I'm just going to do it. Yeah. And then when I got there, I changed it. I was like, I just want to do something else. So after all that thinking, I just ended up doing something different. I love that.
I have done some other rebellious things, but we probably should do them on a different segment.
And that's when we do like Fearless Unplugged or something.
Yeah, Fearless Unplugged.
I love it. Oh, I want to ask you this one. What's one fashion trend that you wish would come back?
Wow, that's quite hard for me to answer, Cindy, because
you're very fashionable, so I needed to know.
Well, so here's the thing. I draw a distinction between fashion and style. So sometimes you will see me wearing things that are in fashion, like the skirt I have on today.
Beautiful.
I mean, pleated skirts are in fashion right now. What I'm wearing is not something that you would see in fashion at the time, because I wear things that are totally congruent with me. I don't care what the fashion is and how crazy people are about it. If it doesn't feel like it's me, I will not wear it. And so for me, it's personal style should be an expression of who you are.
Okay.
And I also think that sometimes women get very stuck in feeling that they're only acceptable if they're fashionable. Mm-hmm. So I always tell women, anything you wear should never hurt your body or your feelings. Yeah. If you're wearing something that hurts your feelings,
don't
chuck
wear
it, give it away,
yeah.
Recycle it, whatever. Wear what feels like you.
Yeah.
You need to be able to feel that energy when you leave the house in the morning, that it makes you feel like I'm on fire.
Yeah, that's why I wear leopard every day.
There you go. I was actually going to wear leopard today.
Were you? That would have been so Gucci, if I could be decked out in leopard from head to toe, I would do it.
Get in line, girl.
and you know what? It's been that burning desire for me to wear leopard ever since I was small. I just gravitated towards leopard things.
Same.
I love it.
Absolutely.
I love it. We're matching spirit animals. There we go. And what's one thing you always have in your bag?
Red lipstick.
Yes, you are the queen of rocking red lipstick. Well, thank you so much, Gucci. I've learned so much about you, the wisdom that you've shared, and I cannot wait for us to open up conversation with women with this new launch of the cards that you have, and just really kind of welcoming people to be themselves and meeting them where they are and have full control of their own authority. I think that is very, very much what we need, especially in this time where people are feeling very disconnected from people, from themselves. So thank you for sharing your journey.
Thank you for having me here, Cindy.
It's
been great. You're a wonderful host.
Thank you. And you can find Gucci at her website, mygempower.com, as well as on Instagram, mygempower, which we'll link in the show notes. And we're going to do a giveaway when we launch the episode. But I think that if there's any women who want to open up a conversation, who want to explore more of themselves, reach out to Gucci. She wants to have this empowerment group, it's really a movement, and we have to all contribute to that movement to make it a community. So anyone who does, please feel free to reach out to her. She's very accessible. Anyone who's willing to chat, to have a conversation, I know you're 100% always ready and willing to be there. So I appreciate what you're doing for all women.
Thank you so much, Cindy.
You're welcome. I'm so glad you joined us today for the Fearless Entrepreneurs podcast. If this episode resonated with you, share it with a friend or someone who could use a little inspiration. You can always reach me, your host, Cindy Chang, directly on Instagram or Spotify DM. I love hearing from you. Don't forget to hit subscribe and leave a review. It truly means the world to me. Until next time, stay fearless.